The Manhattan courtroom was a tomb of silence, its polished wood walls closing in like a trap ready to spring. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs, as Victor Hayes, my ex-husband, stood in his tailored suit, his voice oily and confident. "Your Honor," he said, smirking, "my son Ethan wants to live with me full-time. He's miserable in her unstable, broke existence." The lie burned, hot and sharp, igniting fury that scorched my throat. How dare he twist our boy's words after all he's done? I gripped the bench, nails carving crescents into my palms, the air thick with the stale scent of justice and betrayal. Ethan, only 8, sat beside me, his small hand trembling in mine, his gray jacket creased from nervous fidgeting. The judge, eyes kind but probing, leaned forward. "Is that true, young man?" Time stopped, the clock's tick a deafening pulse. Ethan stood, sneakers scuffing the tile, and pulled his old, scratched phone from his pocket, the one I'd given him for games. "May I play the recording from last night?" he asked, his voice a quiet blade slicing through the room's tension. Gasps erupted. Victor's smirk vanished, his eyes wide with panic. What has he done? I thought, my breath caught, the world tilting as truth prepared to shatter the shadows. "I'm Anna Thompson, a single mom who fought to rebuild a life for my son Ethan in Brooklyn's gritty heart. Once a hopeful barista dreaming of stability, I fell into a love that became a cage. How did we end up in that courtroom, facing a man who'd torn us apart? It started years ago, in a city that both hides and reveals your deepest truths. Before I share how our world changed, drop a comment. Where are you reading from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever overcome a lie to find your strength. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next as Ethan's courage unveils a truth that shakes everything. The rain was coming down hard that morning in 2015, drumming against the windows of Brew and Bloom, a little coffee shop just a stone's throw from Central Park, where I was wiping down counters that smelled of espresso and dreams I didn't dare speak out loud. I was 22, just Anna Thompson, a barista with a faded apron and a heart full of holes from a childhood spent in a cramped Queens apartment with my mom, Margaret, a nurse who'd worked herself raw raising me after Dad walked out when I was 5. The city was all noise, taxis blaring, wet boots slapping the pavement, the air heavy with exhaust and the ache of being nobody in a sea of faces. I felt invisible, my hands moving on autopilot, the rag damp and gritty in my grip, wondering if this was all there'd ever be. Then Victor Hayes walked in, shaking rain from his fancy coat, and everything shifted like the world tilted just for me. He was 28, a real estate hotshot, tall and sure of himself, with a smile that warmed the dim shop like a shot of sunlight through the clouds. "This city's a beast, isn't it?" he said, leaning on the counter, his cologne sharp and musky over the coffee's bitter tang. "But you make it feel human." His green eyes held mine, and for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I was fading away. We talked about New York's chaos, my quiet hope for a steady life, his big plans to build skyscrapers that touch the stars. He asked for my number, and my heart did a little jump like it had woken up after years of sleep. Our first date was like something out of a movie I couldn't afford to see. We walked through Central Park, the leaves crunching under our feet, their gold and red swirling in the cool October air, his hand warm and solid in mine. Over dinner at a little Italian place in Manhattan, the clink of wine glasses and the glow of candles made everything feel possible. "You're not like anyone else, Anna," Victor said, his voice soft, his fingers brushing mine across the table, sending a shiver up my spine. "You're the only one I see in this crazy city." I blushed, my cheeks hot, thinking, is this what love feels like? Someone who sees me, who makes me matter? But there was a moment, just a flicker, when I mentioned a coworker's joke, and his smile tightened, his fork pausing. "He sounds like he's got a thing for you," he said, his tone light but sharp, like a blade hidden in velvet. I laughed it off, but something inside me stirred, a whisper of worry like the wind rattling the restaurant's windows. Things moved fast, too fast maybe, but I was caught up in it, like a leaf in a storm. Victor pushed me to quit the shop. "You don't need that dead-end job," he said one morning in his high-rise apartment, the smell of fresh croissants filling the air, the city's lights twinkling below like a promise. "Let me take care of you. We're building something real." His words were warm, but they pulled at something in me, like a thread unraveling. "I like working," I said, my voice small, the coffee mug hot in my hands. Am I giving up too much? I wondered, but he smiled, waving it away, and I let myself believe it was love. He started liking old photos on my Instagram, leaving comments like, "You're mine now," and I felt a mix of flattery and unease, my friends' messages fading as he called them jealous nobodies. I deleted a few contacts, each one a small cut, the screen's glow cold against my guilt. One night, while tidying his desk, I saw an email on his laptop, something about confidential deals with names I didn't know and numbers that didn't add up. My heart thumped, loud as the city's pulse outside. What's he hiding? Before I could read more, Victor walked in, locking the drawer with a click that sounded final. "That's just business, Anna," he said, his smile tight, kissing my forehead. "Nothing for you to worry about." I nodded, but the air felt heavier, like the city's smog had crept inside. Mom saw it too, her eyes narrowing over tea in her kitchen, the steam curling like a warning. "Be careful, honey," she said, her voice low. "Men like him shine bright, but they can burn you." I brushed it off, but her words stuck like a splinter I couldn't pull out. We moved into his Manhattan apartment, the views so beautiful it hurt. Lights sparkling like stars, the hum of traffic a distant heartbeat. But when he locked another cabinet saying, "Some things stay private," a chill settled in me, a hint of the shadows waiting to grow. Our new life in Victor's Manhattan high-rise felt like a dream I didn't quite trust. The kind where you're running but can't tell if you're chasing something or being chased. The apartment was all sleek lines and glittering views, the city's lights twinkling below like stars I could never touch, their glow both beautiful and cold. Victor would cook us dinners, the sizzle of steaks filling the air with a warmth that made me believe we were building something real, something lasting. We'd go to Broadway shows, the theater's velvet seats soft under me, the music swelling like my heart when he'd lean close, his breath warm on my cheek, whispering how I was his everything. But even in those moments, a shadow crept in, slow and quiet, like the fog that rolled off the Hudson and clung to the city's edges, making everything feel just a little off, a little heavy, like I was holding my breath without knowing why. It started small, so small I barely noticed at first. Victor would sit with me on the couch, the TV flickering with some movie we weren't really watching, and he'd scroll through my Facebook, his fingers tapping the screen, his voice smooth but pointed. "These friends of yours, Anna, they're not good for you," he'd say, his eyes narrowing at a photo of me with Claire from the coffee shop days. "They're jealous, trying to pull you away from us." His words were soft, almost caring, but they stung, like paper cuts you don't feel until later. I'd laugh, say he was being silly, but I'd delete a contact or two. Claire, Mike, people who'd made me laugh in another life, each click a little piece of me slipping away. He's just looking out for me, right? I'd think, my chest tightening, the city's hum outside our windows sounding more like a warning than a lullaby. When I found out I was pregnant, it was like the world cracked open with light. In our marble bathroom, the test's 2 pink lines blurred through my tears, and I sank to the floor, the tiles cold against my knees, joy and fear tangling in my heart. Victor knelt beside me, his hands on my face, his smile so bright it almost hid the sharpness in his eyes. "Our family," he said, kissing me, and I felt like I was floating, like New York's chaos couldn't touch us. But then came the rules, soft at first, like whispers. "You don't need to see those old friends anymore," he said, locking my phone screen, the click loud in the quiet. "Stay home. Keep the baby safe." I nodded, the antiseptic smell of the bathroom choking me, thinking, he's protecting us, isn't he? But my hands shook, and I couldn't shake the feeling I was shrinking, becoming smaller in his world. The fights came next, small but sharp, like needles under my skin. One day I put on a dress for a grocery run on Fifth Avenue, the fabric soft and blue, making me feel like myself again. Victor's eyes darkened, his voice low. "Who are you trying to impress out there?" he asked, standing too close, his cologne sharp and heavy. My cheeks burned and I changed, mumbling apologies, the store's chatter fading as shame settled in my gut. Am I doing something wrong? I wondered, my heart racing. At a company party in the Hamptons, the ocean's roar outside, he raised his glass to the crowd, his voice loud. Anna's too busy being pregnant to keep up tonight, he said, his hand tight on my shoulder, laughter rippling like salt in a wound. I smiled, my wineglass untouched. But inside I was crumbling, the sea air bitter in my lungs. Mom saw it when she visited, her eyes narrowing over tea in our kitchen, the steam curling like secrets. "You're fading, Anna," she said, her voice low, her hands gripping mine, rough from years of nursing. "Men like him, they take until there's nothing left." I defended him. "He's just stressed." But her words stuck, like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Then came the twist that shook me. Cleaning his office, I found a folder on his laptop labeled X, with photos of a woman bruised and notes about her greed. My heart pounded loud as the city's pulse. Who was she? Victor caught me slamming the laptop shut, the sound like a door closing. "She was nothing, Anna," he said, his smile tight. "Not like you." I nodded, but fear coiled in me, a warning I couldn't ignore. Our wedding at City Hall was quick, the clerk's voice flat, the ring cold on my finger. That night, Victor whispered, "You're mine forever," his breath hot on my ear, and my heart stuttered, not with love but with something heavier, something I couldn't name. Outside, New York's lights flickered, watching as the chains tightened. Ethan's birth was like a burst of light in the middle of a storm, a moment so bright it almost hid the darkness creeping into our lives. In a midtown hospital, the sharp smell of antiseptic stung my nose as his first cry cut through the sterile hum, a sound that wrapped around my heart like a lifeline. I held him close, his tiny body warm against my chest, his fingers curling around mine as if he knew we'd need each other to survive. The city's chaos, its honking taxis, its towering shadows, faded away, and for a moment I felt unbreakable, like I could carry us both through anything. Victor was there, smiling for the cameras, posting perfect family on Instagram with that polished charm that made everyone believe he was the hero. But back in our Manhattan high-rise, with its cold marble floors and glittering views, the truth started to show, like cracks in a mirror you can't unsee, reflecting something ugly beneath the shine. Victor's control wasn't loud at first. It was quiet, sneaky, like the way fog slips into the city and chokes the air without you noticing. He didn't help with the sleepless nights, leaving me to pace the apartment, Ethan's wails bouncing off the high ceilings, the sound sharp and desperate in the dark. "You're the mom, Anna, figure it out," he'd mutter, rolling over in silk sheets that whispered betrayal, his voice cold as the city's wind rattling our windows. He took away my debit card, saying, "You don't need it, I've got us covered," handing me cash like I was a kid asking for allowance. If I put on makeup to feel like myself again, he'd snap, "What, you too lazy to try or dressing up for someone else?" His words were like slaps, quick and stinging, leaving marks no one could see. Am I failing him? Failing Ethan? I'd think, rocking my son, the distant wail of sirens outside making me feel like I was drowning in a city that didn't care. Ethan grew fast, a joyful little boy with giggles that filled the apartment like sunlight, chasing toy cars across the floor, his curls bouncing. But he'd freeze when Victor raised his voice, his brown eyes, too much like mine, wide with a fear that broke my heart. One night, I called Mom from the bathroom, the water running to hide my voice, the steam hot and heavy around me. "He's not the man I thought," I whispered, my hands shaking, the phone slick in my grip. "He's scaring me, and Ethan sees it." Her voice was steady like a lifeline through the fog. "Your dad was the same, controlling, cruel. I kept photos, Anna, bruises, proof. Get out before it's worse." Her words hit hard, stirring memories of her own quiet battles. But fear held me back. What if Victor takes Ethan? What if I can't make it alone? I thought, my stomach knotting, the mirror reflecting a woman I barely recognized. The abuse grew bolder, like a storm building strength. Victor threw my phone when I texted Mom, the screen shattering against the wall with a crack that echoed my crumbling spirit. "No secrets, Anna," he growled, his cologne sharp and suffocating as he towered over me. I picked up the pieces, Ethan's cries from his crib cutting through me, each sob a call to fight back. I started to feel watched, like the apartment's cameras were Victor's eyes, their red lights blinking in the dark. Is he always watching? I wondered, my pulse racing as I swept the floor, the the broom's bristles scraping like my nerves. The breaking point came one stormy night when Ethan, barely 3, spilled water on the rug, the puddle glinting under the chandelier's light. Victor exploded, his voice a thunderclap that shook the walls. "Clean it up, you clumsy brat!" he roared, his fists clenched. Ethan cowered, clutching his toy car, and I stepped between them, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the rain. "Don't you dare yell at him," I said, my voice shaking but firm, my body a shield. Victor's eyes darkened and he pushed me, my back slamming into the counter, pain shooting through me like lightning. Ethan's sob was a spark, igniting something fierce inside. I can't let this happen to him, I thought, my hands steadying my trembling son. That night, as thunder rattled the city, I packed a bag, diapers, clothes, a photo of us that felt like a lie. The zipper's rasp was loud in the silence, my heart racing like the rain outside. I called Mom, her voice a beacon. "Come now," she said. We fled in a cab, Ethan asleep in my arms, the city's lights blurring through the rain like tears. Victor's call came before dawn, his voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this, Anna." Fear gripped me, but resolve burned brighter. The rain was pouring that night we fled, the cab's tires hissing on wet pavement, Ethan asleep in my arms, his small breaths warm against my neck like a promise that we could start over. New York's lights blurred through the windows, streaking like tears I couldn't let fall. And when Mom opened her queen's door, the smell of chamomile tea and old wood wrapped around us like a blanket. "You're safe now, Anna," she said, her voice steady but her eyes shining with tears, her arms pulling us into a hug that felt like home. I wanted to believe her, but Victor's voice, low and venomous, "You'll regret this," echoed in my head, a dark cloud hanging over the fragile hope I was clinging to. Can I really keep Ethan safe? I wondered, my heart pounding as I held him tighter, the city's hum outside a reminder of the world waiting to judge us. For 2 weeks we stayed hidden in Mom's cramped house, the creak of the floorboards underfoot a familiar comfort, like a lullaby from my childhood. Ethan played with her old toys, his giggles soft as he stacked blocks, but his eyes would dart to the windows, as if he felt Victor's shadow too. I spent hours on Mom's ancient laptop, the screen's flicker burning my eyes, searching for jobs to rebuild our life. I'm doing this for him, I told myself, my fingers trembling as I typed. I landed 2 jobs, days at a Brooklyn library, the dusty smell of books calming my nerves like a quiet prayer, nights cleaning offices, the mop's slosh and fluorescent buzz grinding into my bones. Exhaustion was heavy, but each paycheck was a step toward freedom, a brick in a wall I hoped would hold. The divorce was a war fought in a cold Manhattan courtroom, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and power. Victor's lawyer, all sharp suits and sharper words, painted me as a mess, a single mom barely scraping by, unfit for Ethan. Victor sat there, his Rolex glinting, his wealth a weapon that made me feel small. Society's judgment cut deep. People like me, working 2 jobs, living in a dump, were failures in their eyes, not mothers fighting for their kids. I won primary custody, the gavels bang loud in my ears, but Victor's whisper as he left, "I'll show Ethan who the real parent is," was a knife in my chest. He's not done with us, I thought, my hands shaking, the courtroom's echo carrying my fear. We moved to a tiny Brooklyn apartment, the walls so thin I could hear neighbors arguing. The faint smell of fresh paint a hopeful start. Ethan took to it, kicking a soccer ball in the park nearby, grass sticking to his sneakers as he laughed. "Look, Mommy, I'm fast." His joy patched the holes in my heart, but the whispers at school drop-offs hurt. Mom's eyeing my worn coat, muttering about, "That poor kid with no dad." They don't see how hard I'm trying, I thought. Anger burning as I tucked Ethan in, his superhero blanket soft but frayed, like my dreams. Victor's visits every other weekend were like storm clouds rolling in. He'd pull up in his shiny SUV, the engine's purr a quiet threat, bringing Ethan toys I could never afford, drones, game consoles, all wrapped in his charm. "This place is pathetic," he'd say, his eyes cutting through me like glass. Ethan came back quiet, his hands fidgeting, his smile gone. "Did you have fun with Daddy?" I'd ask, stirring pancake batter, the sweet smell of syrup hiding my worry. He'd nod, but his eyes looked away, holding secrets I couldn't reach. One night, he climbed into my bed, his voice small. What if someone lies and people believe them? My throat closed up. What's Victor saying to him? I held him, the city's lights flickering outside like a warning. Mom saw it too, over coffee in her kitchen, the steam rising like our fears. He's plotting, Anna, she said, her hands tight around her mug. Men like him don't let go. Her words echoed her own past, and I started seeing shadows, figures lingering outside our building, footsteps following me on Brooklyn streets, my pulse racing like the subway's rumble. Then came the twist, a text from an unknown number, cold and sharp. Victor's watching. He hired a detective. My heart stopped, the phone's glow harsh in the dark, fear wrapping around me like the city's smog. 2 years of shaky peace broke when a courier dropped off custody papers, the envelope heavy in my hands, accusing me of being unstable. I sank to the kitchen floor, coffee spilling, the bitter smell stinging my nose. Ethan watched, his eyes steady but scared. He's coming for my boy, I thought, terror and fury crashing like a storm over New York. Our Brooklyn apartment was a small island of hope, its thin walls and creaky floors holding us together like a promise I prayed I could keep. Mornings were filled with the sizzle of pancakes on the griddle, the sweet smell of maple syrup curling through the air, Ethan's giggles bubbling up as he smeared butter with sticky fingers, his brown eyes bright with the kind of joy that made my heart ache with gratitude. At 8, he was my anchor, racing out to the school bus with his backpack bouncing, the chatter of kids on the street a song of normalcy we'd fought so hard to claim. But even in these moments, Victor's shadow lingered, a cold wind that slipped through the cracks of our new life, reminding me that freedom was fragile, like the city's lights flickering outside our window, beautiful but never quite steady. We'd built routines to hold us up. Ethan thrived at his public school, kicking a soccer ball in Prospect Park, grass clinging to his sneakers as he shouted, "Mommy, I'm gonna score!" I worked days at the Brooklyn Library, the dusty scent of books a quiet comfort, a reminder I was more than my past. Nights, I cleaned offices, the mop's slosh and fluorescent hum grinding into my tired bones, but each paycheck was a brick in our shaky foundation. Mom, Margaret, was our rock, watching Ethan with stories of her own escape from my father's control, her voice steady over coffee in her queen's kitchen, the steam rising like hope. "You're doing right by him, Anna," she'd say, her hands rough but warm around mine. I'm trying so hard, I thought, but the weight of being a single mom pressed down, heavy as the city's smog, with whispers at school drop-offs, moms eyeing my faded coat, muttering about that kid with no dad. Their judgment stung, a class divide that branded me less because I had less. I dared to hope, even let myself smile with Mark, a kind coworker who'd walk with me in the park, leaves crunching underfoot, his shy laugh warming the chilly air. "You're stronger than you know," he'd say, his hand brushing mine, and for a moment, I believed him. But Victor's visits every other weekend were like clouds rolling in, darkening our light. He'd pull up in his gleaming SUV, the engine's low growl a threat, bringing Ethan toys I could never afford, drones, game consoles, all wrapped in his fake smile. "This is what a real parent gives," he'd sneer, his eyes cutting through me like glass. Ethan came back quieter, his hands fidgeting with the old phone I'd given him for games, his eyes dodging mine. "Did you have fun with Daddy?" I'd ask, stirring batter, the sweet smell of pancakes masking my worry. He'd nod, but his silence was heavy, like a secret he couldn't share. What's Victor doing to him? I wondered, my heart twisting, the city's hum outside sounding more like a warning than a comfort. The city itself felt like it was watching. I'd see shadows lingering outside our building, their shapes blending into Brooklyn's dusk, footsteps echoing behind me on subway rides home, my pulse racing like the train's rumble. Is Victor following me? I thought, checking locks twice, the click of bolts loud in the quiet. Online, his campaign grew crueler. Posts on local forums called me unstable, a broke mom dragging her kid down, the likes from his rich friends fueling my anger. They judge my empty pockets, not my love, I seethed, scrolling through the hate, the phone's glow harsh in the dark, One night, Ethan climbed into my bed, his breath warm against my cheek, his voice small but sharp. "Does Daddy love me?" he asked, his eyes searching mine under the glow of his superhero blanket. My throat closed up. How do I answer without breaking him? "He loves you in his way," I said, stroking his hair, "but we're safer here." He nodded, but something in his eyes, fear turning to steel, told me he was carrying a weight I didn't yet see. I didn't know then that he'd been recording Victor's calls on that old phone, his small fingers hiding a truth that could change everything. The twist came like a shock. A text from an unknown number, cold and sharp. "Victor hired a detective, he's watching." My heart stopped, the screen's light burning my eyes, coffee mug slipping to shatter on the floor. He's everywhere, I thought, sweeping up shards, the broom's scrape loud as my fear. Then, one evening, a courier delivered custody papers, accusing me of endangering Ethan with my poverty. I sank to the floor, papers crumpling, the bitter smell of spilled coffee stinging my nose. Ethan watched, his eyes steady. He's coming for my boy, I thought, terror and fury crashing like a storm. The air in our Brooklyn apartment grew heavy, like the city was holding its breath before a storm, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your heart race without knowing why. Victor's custody papers sat like a weight on the kitchen table, their words: unstable mother, endangering environment, cutting into me like a knife I couldn't pull out. The city's noise outside, the wail of sirens and the chatter of passers-by, felt like it was mocking me, reminding me how small I was against Victor's wealth and power. I'd catch shadows moving outside our building, their shapes blending into the dusk, footsteps trailing me on my walks home from the library, the subway's rumble matching the thud of my pulse. Is he watching us? I thought, my hands trembling as I locked the door, the bolts click loud in the quiet, a thin shield against the fear that was wrapping around me like New York's smog. Victor's campaign was relentless, like a tide pulling us under. His lawyer sent letters, sharp and cold, accusing me of failing Ethan with my poverty-stricken life, each word a jab at my pride. Online, his friends posted lies on neighborhood forums, calling me a deadbeat mom, their likes piling up like stones on my chest. They see my empty wallet, not my love, I thought, anger burning as I scrolled through the hate, the phone's glow harsh in the dark kitchen, coffee cooling untouched. The single mom stigma stung, the whispers at Ethan's school, moms eyeing my worn shoes, muttering about that poor kid, making me feel like I was failing him, even as I fought to keep us afloat. Ethan felt it too, his brown eyes shadowed with a worry no 8-year-old should carry. After Victor's visits, he'd come back quiet, his hands fidgeting with the old phone I'd given him for games, his laughter gone like a light switched off. "Did you have fun with Daddy?" I'd ask, flipping pancakes, the sweet smell of syrup hiding the knot in my stomach. He'd nod, but his eyes looked away, holding secrets I couldn't reach. One night, he crawled into my bed, his breath warm against my cheek, his voice small but sharp. "What if someone threatens you, Mommy, and no one believes me?" My heart stopped, my throat closing up. What's Victor doing to him? I held him tight, the city's hum outside a distant threat. "We'll tell the truth, baby," I said, stroking his hair, even if it's hard. But his silence was heavy, like he was carrying a weight I didn't yet see. Mom saw it coming, her warnings sharp over coffee in her queen's kitchen, the steam curling like our fears. "He's plotting, Anna," she said, her hands tight around her mug, her voice low. "Men like him don't let go." She pulled out a shoebox, old photos spilling out, her own bruises from my father, proof of a cycle I was trapped in. "I kept these for a reason," she said, her eyes meeting mine, and my stomach twisted, seeing my past in hers. Then came a twist that shook me. She whispered about a rumor, something she'd heard through old hospital friends. Victor had a daughter from another relationship, a girl he'd controlled and hurt, now hidden away. Another victim? I thought, my pulse racing, the coffee's bitterness sharp on my tongue. The idea of someone else out there silenced like I'd been made my anger flare hotter, but fear kept me quiet. Victor's moves grew darker. The weekend before the hearing, he pulled up early in his SUV, the engine's growl a warning, leaning close to Ethan in the car. From the window I saw his lips move fast, Ethan's shoulders sinking. When Ethan came back, he was pale, a ghost of my boy, retreating to his room with that phone. "Everything okay?" I asked, kneeling beside him, the carpet rough under my knees, his small hands clutching the device. He nodded, but tears glinted in his eyes, and I didn't know then that he'd been recording Victor's calls, his small fingers hiding a truth that could break us free. The night before court, my phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "Victor's detective is closer than you think." Fear clawed at me, the screen's light burning my eyes, my heart pounding like the city's pulse. Victor called Ethan that night, his voice a hiss through the speaker. "Say you want me, or your mom's gone for good." I overheard from the hallway, my blood turning to ice. Ethan said nothing, but his silence was a spark, a fire I didn't yet understand. He slipped the phone into his gray jacket, his eyes steady but scared, ready for the fight I wasn't sure I could face. The Manhattan family courthouse was so quiet it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. A silence so heavy it made my heart pound louder than it should, each beat a drum echoing off the polished wood walls. I sat on the hard bench, my hands trembling, nails digging into the worn fabric of my skirt, as Victor stood tall in his crisp suit, his voice smooth and sharp, like a blade slicing through the truth. "Your Honor," he said, his smirk curling like smoke, "my son Ethan wants to live with me full-time, away from her chaotic broke life in that Brooklyn dump." The lie burned me, hot and bitter, rage flaring in my chest like a fire I couldn't put out. How could he twist our boy's words after all he's done to us? Ethan, just 8, sat beside me, his small legs swinging, his gray jacket bunched around his shoulders, his hand clutching mine with a grip that said he was scared but not broken. The gallery whispered, their judgment, single mom, poor, unfit, stinging like needles under my skin, a class divide that made me feel small against Victor's wealth. The judge, his gray hair catching the light, leaned forward, his eyes kind but searching behind his glasses. "Young man," he said to Ethan, his voice soft but firm, "is that true? Do you want to live with your father?" Time stretched, the clock's tick a slow hammer in my ears, my breath caught in my throat like I was drowning. Ethan stood, his sneakers scuffing the tile, soft and deliberate, and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his old phone, scratched and faded from games, and held it up, his small hand steady. "May I play a recording from last night?" he asked, his voice quiet but clear, like a bell ringing through the fog of the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the room, sharp and sudden, like a wave breaking. Victor's smirk froze, his eyes widening, a predator caught in a trap. What has he done to my boy? I thought, my heart lurching, the air thick with the smell of polished wood and impending truth. The bailiff took the phone, passing it to the judge, who raised an eyebrow, his fingers pausing on the device. "A recording?" he asked. Ethan nodded, his shoulders squared despite his size. "From Daddy," he said, his voice small but fierce. "I had to save Mommy." My throat closed up, pride and fear crashing together like thunder. The judge pressed play and Victor's voice filled the room, cold and venomous, cutting through the silence. "Tell the judge you want me, Ethan, or I'll make sure your mom disappears, gone forever." Ethan's recorded voice trembled. "But I love Mommy." Victor snapped back. "Love? She's dragging you down with her pathetic life. Say it or she pays." The courtroom gasped, a collective breath that sucked the air dry. Victor's face drained, his jaw slack. His lawyer dropped his pen, the clatter loud in the stunned silence. My rage boiled over, hot and blinding, as the judge replayed the tape, each word a hammer striking Victor's lies. Then came the twist, sharper than I could have imagined. Ethan's recordings, collected over weeks, revealed more. Victor boasting about hiding money, dodging taxes, using custody to shield his crimes. "The money's safe, kid." His voice sneered on another tape. "Stick with me, and we're untouchable." The gallery erupted, reporters scribbling, their pens scratching like accusations. Victor lunged forward, his face twisted. "That's fake, you little brat!" he roared, but the bailiff grabbed him, cuffs clicking like Justice's heartbeat. The judge's gavel slammed, his voice thunder. "Order! Mr. Hayes, you've just incriminated yourself." The revelation deepened, a knife in my heart. Ethan's tapes exposed Victor's plan to hire a fixer to remove me permanently. a plot whispered in a call he thought was secret. He meant to kill me, I thought, the room spinning, fear and fury colliding. The judge turned to Ethan, his voice soft. "You're incredibly brave, son. This court sees the truth." Ethan squeezed my hand, whispering, "I had to protect you, Mommy." Tears pricked my eyes. My boy, so strong, I thought, pride swelling like a tide. Then came another twist. A video call patched through, a teenage girl, Victor's secret daughter from a past relationship, her voice breaking. "He controlled me too, threatened me," she said, her words a mirror to mine. The irony was sharp, his hidden past unraveling his lies. Victor's lawyer cried manipulation, accusing me of coaching Ethan, a desperate lie that hung in the air. The judge ordered verification, calling a recess, but as police led Victor away, his shouts, "This isn't over!" echoed down the hall, a final threat in a crumbling empire. The Manhattan courthouse faded behind us as we stepped into a spring morning, the air sharp with the scent of cherry blossoms from a nearby park, their petals drifting like soft promises on the breeze. Ethan's hand was warm in mine, his sneakers scuffing the sidewalk, a steady rhythm that anchored me after the storm of Victor's lies had broken. My heart, once tangled with fear, now beat with a fragile hope, like sunlight spilling through Brooklyn's gray skyline, warming the cracks in my soul. The city's hum, taxis honking, voices rising, felt alive again, not a threat, but a song of survival. We made it through, I thought, but Victor's final shout, "This isn't over," lingered in my ears, a ghost I wasn't sure we'd fully escaped. Ethan looked up at me, his brown eyes bright but searching, and I wondered, what does it cost a child to save his mother? Victor's downfall was everywhere. Headlines screaming, "Millionaire's fraud exposed by son's recording" on my phone as Mom drove us home to Brooklyn, the car's heater humming softly against the chill. The judge had ruled in our favor. Full custody was mine, Victor's visitation revoked, his fraud and conspiracy charges sending him to prison. In the courtroom, his cuffs had glinted like the justice Ethan's courage had forged, his empire crumbling under the weight of a child's truth. But the victory was bittersweet, heavy with the scars we carried. How do you heal when your son had to be the hero? I thought, glancing at Ethan in the back seat, his fingers tracing the window's fog, his silence louder than the city's noise. Back in our apartment, life stitched itself together, slow and careful, like mending a torn blanket. The creak of the floorboards, the smell of coffee, and Ethan's crayons felt like home again. Ethan went back to school, his laughter ringing in Prospect Park as he kicked a soccer ball, grass staining his knees. "Look, Mommy, I'm gonna be a pro!" he'd shout, his grin wide, the shadow of Victor fading like a bad dream. But nights brought questions, his small voice cutting through the dark under his superhero blanket. "Will Daddy ever come back?" he asked, his breath warm against my cheek. My throat tightened. How do I answer without hurting him? "He's facing what he did," I said, stroking his hair, its softness grounding me. "But you're safe, and that's everything." He nodded, whispering, "I protected you, Mommy, didn't I?" His words broke me open, pride and pain mixing like rain and sunlight. My boy, so brave, I thought, tears pricking my eyes. Healing was a slow dance, each step deliberate. We started therapy, the counselor's office warm with cedar and soft light, where Ethan drew pictures of superhero me, his phone a shield of truth. Mom moved closer, her queen's kitchen a haven of chamomile tea and stories. "I stayed too long with your dad," she confessed one evening, her hands trembling around her mug. "You and Ethan broke that chain." Her words were a mirror, showing me our strength, a legacy of survival I hadn't seen before. We're more than our scars, I thought, my heart steadying like the city's pulse outside. A twist came softly, like a breeze carrying a new truth. Lily, Victor's secret daughter from a past relationship, reached out with a letter, her handwriting shaky but sure. We met in Central Park, cherry blossoms falling like confetti, her eyes, so like Ethan's, holding the same pain I knew. "He controlled me too, threatened me," she said, her voice breaking as we sat on a bench, the park's chatter a gentle hum. Ethan's courage gave me mine. Empathy wove us together, a family born not of blood, but of shared survival. He hurt us all, but we're still standing, I thought, the spring air sweet with second chances. I started a blog, Shadows to Light, sharing our story without names, my words spilling like tears. Comments flooded. Your son saved me. I left too, building a community of voices. Ethan's line, "May I play a recording?" went viral, a call to truth shared across platforms, sparking debates. What would you do to protect your child? A year later, Victor's letter came from prison, his "I'm sorry" hollow on cheap paper. I stood by the sink, the city's glow soft through the window, and burned it, ash falling like shed burdens, the smoke sharp in my nose. Ethan ran in, kite in hand. "Let's fly it high, Mommy," he said, his grin bright as New York's dawn. Justice wasn't revenge, it was our voices rising. Ethan taught me a child's truth can shatter empires. If you're fighting shadows, speak. It's your light.